What's up, fellow pilots? It's Caleb here from Air 101. Now imagine that you just had a forced landing at a location where it's either impossible or unsafe to take off and there was no damage done to your aircraft. Now, do you know if your aviation insurance policy has coverage for this type of situation and for your aircraft to be relocated? Well, let's talk about it. Now, you personally may have heard of forced landing coverage before, but you may not know what it actually is and how much coverage your policy will give you in the event that you actually have a forced landing. I have pulled up one policy wording on the screen that talks about forced landing coverage. Now, please know, this wording can vary from aviation insurance company to aviation insurance company. The wording reads here: if you are required to force land your aircraft at a place from which it is impossible or unsafe to take off, provided that you purchase coverage A for the aircraft that was force landed and where no damage has occurred to the aircraft, we will pay for reasonable expenses of disassembly and removal of the aircraft to the nearest suitable aerodrome. The maximum we will pay in such circumstances is 20% of the amount of coverage A insurance of the aircraft that was force landed, less the applicable deductible shown on the policy data page. We will not pay for any expense associated with the correcting of any mechanical difficulty. Well, what does this wording really mean? This means that if you ended up landing at a location either due to an engine failure, fuel starvation, or extreme weather, and then once you landed at this location, it was impossible for you to take off or unsafe, then you might have coverage under this type of wording. Please note when we're looking at this wording that you would need to have all risk flight and ground coverage for this coverage to actually be activated, and there had to be no damage done to the aircraft itself. Then we notice when looking at this wording, it says that the insurance company will pay for reasonable expenses of disassembly and removal of the aircraft to the nearest suitable aerodrome. And it says that the maximum that they will pay is 20%. So what this means is if you have a Cessna 172 that's worth $50,000 and you have this forced landing situation come up, the insurance company is willing to pay 20% of that $50,000 to move your aircraft to the nearest suitable aerodrome. So 20% of $50,000 would be $10,000. So what this means is the insurance company is willing to pay up to $10,000 to fulfill this section of the policy wording. Please note that this limit can vary from insurance company to insurance company. One insurance company may be only willing to pay 10% of the hull value. Others may be willing to pay up to 50% or even higher of the hull value to help move your aircraft to another suitable aerodrome. Limits of 50% or higher is definitely rarer, but I have seen it before. Some things to think about in a forced landing situation. Number one, as already mentioned, you would need to have all risk flight and ground coverage for this section of the policy to be activated, and there would have to be no damage done to the aircraft itself. Now, what happens if you had a forced landing and there was damage done to the aircraft? Well, we're going to be talking about that in a future video. Number two, the aircraft will only be moved to the nearest suitable aerodrome. So if you live in British Columbia and you're flying in Ontario and you have a forced landing, then in this situation, the aircraft is going to be moved to the nearest suitable aerodrome, which is most likely still going to be in Ontario. Please note that it says the nearest suitable aerodrome. So this is where you can actually communicate with the insurance company and try and find an airport that has an AME at it that actually can work on your aircraft afterwards. For example, if you had an engine failure or something along these lines. The insurance company in most cases is willing to work with you because they don't want to just drop off your aircraft at an airport where there's no actual facilities to help you get your aircraft going again. This is why it's best to have open communication with your aviation insurance company when a forced landing situation happens and when deciding which airport to move your aircraft to. Number three, be aware of what your deductible is. What I mean by this is if you have a $30,000 aircraft and have forced landing coverage. Now, once again, in this policy wording, it says 20% of coverage A, which is all risk flight and ground. So 20% of $30,000 is $6,000. Now, if you happen to have a $5,000 deductible, in that wording it said they would give 20% less the deductible. So if the deductible is $5,000 and forced landing coverage is $6,000, then really you're only going to get $1,000. $1,000 is not a lot of money to move your aircraft to another suitable aerodrome after you've had a forced landing. The reason why I want to bring this up is we right now are in a hard market. So people are trying to save money by increasing their deductible on their aircraft policy. So make sure that you don't take such a high deductible that you lose out on some of the coverages on your policy wording, or overly decrease the amount the insurance company is going to pay in the event that a forced landing really does happen. These are just a couple things to look out for when you're reviewing your forced landing coverage in your aircraft insurance policy. I hope as a pilot and or aircraft owner that you have learned something today. Please stay current, stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.